A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Second part of Chapter 7. I should now go on to display the subtlety of this powerful, malicious, cruel, and diligent adversary. There is but one thing in the way, which hitherto I have taken for granted, and that is, whether indeed there be any such things as devils and wicked spirits, or that these are but theological engines contrived by persons that carry a good will to morality and the public peace, to keep men under an awful fear of such miscarriages as may render them otherwise a shame to themselves, and a trouble to others. It must be acknowledged a transgression of the rules of method, to offer a proof of that now, which if at all, ought to have been proved in the beginning of the discourse, and indeed the question at this length, whether there be a devil, hath such affinity with that other, though for the matter, they are as different as heaven and hell, whether there be a God, that is it well deserves a confirmation, for the use that may be made of it, to evidence that there is a God, because we feel there is a devil, so would it require serious endeavor, to perform it substantially. But it would be not only a needless labor, to levy an army against professed atheists, who with high scorn and derision, roundly deny both God and devils, seeing others have frequently done that, but also it would occasion, too large a digression from our present design. I shall therefore only speak a few things to those that own a God, and yet deny such a devil, as we have described, and yet not to all of these neither, for there were many heathens, who were confident asserters of a deity, that nevertheless, denied the being of spirits, as severed from corporeity, and others were so far, from the acknowledgment of devils, that they confounded them in the number of their gods. Others there were who gave such credit to the frequent relations of apparitions and disturbances of that kind, that many had attested and complained of, that they expressed more ingenuity than Lucian, who pertinaciously refused to believe, because he never saw them, and yet though they believed something of reality, in that was the affrightment and trouble of others, they nevertheless ascribed such extraordinary things to natural causes, some to the powers of the heavens and stars, in their influences upon natural bodies, or by the mediation of certain herbs, stones, minerals, creatures, voices, and characters, under a special observation of the motion of the planets. Some refer such things to the subtlety and quickness of the senses of hearing and seeing, which might create forms and images of things, or discover I know not what reflections from the sun and moon. Some, Pomponiacious, Epicureans, fancy the shapes and visions to be exuvi, thin scales or skins of natural things, giving representations of the bodies that cast them off, or exhalations from sepulchres, representing the shape of the body. Others, Cardan, academics, make them the effects of our untrusty and deceitful senses, the debility and corruption whereof they conclude to be such, and so general, that most men are in hazard to be imposed upon, by delusive appearances, but with far greater show of likelihood, do some, averroes, make all such things to be nothing else but the issues of melancholy, and corrupt humors, which makes men believe they hear, see, and suffer strange things, when there is nothing near them, or really to undergo strange fits, as in lunacy and epilepsy. Leaving these men, as not capable of information from Scripture evidence, because disowning it, let us inquire what mistaken apprehensions there have been in this matter among those that have pretended, a reverence to and belief of Scripture. The Sadducees deserve the first place, because they are by name noted in Scripture to have denied the resurrection, and to have affirmed that there is neither angel nor spirit, Acts 23:8, and Matthew 22:23. This opinion of theirs, could we certainly find it out, would make much for the confirmation of the truth in question, seeing, whatever it was, it is positively condemned in Scripture, and the contrary asserted to be true. Many, and that upon considerable grounds, do think that they do not deny absolutely that there were any angels at all, but that, acknowledging that something there was, which was called an angel, yet they imagining it to be far otherwise than what it is indeed, were accused justly, for denying such a kind of angels as the Scripture had everywhere asserted, and described. For considering that they owned a God, and, at least, the 5 books of Moses, if not all the other books of the Old Testament, as Scaliger and others judge, not without great probability, for neither doth the Scripture, nor Josephus, mention any such thing of the prophets, it is unimaginable that they would altogether deny that there was angel or spirit at all. They read of angels appearing to Lot, to Abraham, and met with it so frequently, that, believing Scriptures to be true, they could not believe angels to be an absolute fiction, for one fable or falsity in Scripture, which so highly asserts itself to be an unerring oracle of the true God, must of necessity have destroyed the credit of all, and rendered them as justly suspected to be true in nothing, when apparently false or fabulous in anything. Again, if we call to mind what apprehensions they had of God, which all consent, they did acknowledge, we might more easily imagine, what apprehensions they had of angels, for in regard that Moses made mention of God's face and back parts. Exodus 33, and that frequently hands and other parts of man's body were attributed to him, they concluded God to be corporeal, and seeing the best of creatures which God created cannot be supposed to have a more noble being, than was that of their Creator, and, at the utmost, to be made according to the pattern of his own image and likeness, they might upon this bottom, easily fix a denial of incorporeal spirits, and by consequence, that the soul of man was mortal, and therefore that there could be no resurrection. So that the nature of angels being described under the notion of spiritual substances, they are judged to deny any such thing, supposing that to be incorporeal, was as much as not to be at all, and yet it were unreasonable to deny, that they had not some interpretation for those passages of Scripture, that mentioned angels, which in their apprehensions, might be some salvo to the truth of those historical writings, which they acknowledged. But what that was we are next to conjecture. And indeed Josephus, by a little hint of their opinion, seems to tell us that they did not so much deny the being of the soul, as the permanency of it. And so, by consequence, they might not so much deny absolutely the existence of spirits, as their natural being and continuance. Something there was that was called by the name of angel, that they could not but own, and that this must be a real, and not an imaginary thing, is evident from the real effect, and things done by them, yet observing their appearances, to have been upon some special occasion, and their disappearing to have been on a sudden, they might conjecture them to be created by God, for the present service, and then reduced to nothing, when that service was done. Their opinion, then, of angels seems to be one of these two. Either that they were corporeal substances created upon a special emergency, but not permanent beings, or that they were but images and impressions, supernaturally formed in the fancy, by the special operation of God, to signify his mind and commands to men, upon which they might fitly be called, God's messengers and ministers. I put in this last into the conjecture, because I find it mentioned by Calvin, as the opinion of the Sadducees. But both are noted by Diodate, on Acts 23:8, as with equal probability belonging to them. His words are, they did not believe they were subsisting and immortal creatures, but transitory apparitions, or some divine actions and motions, to produce some special and notable effect. Thanks.